On a frozen Christmas Eve, when the whole town had gone silent, no one was supposed to see what happened in that alley. No one, except a former Navy SEAL and his war dog. Beneath the falling snow, a female police officer lay beaten, bound with zip ties, her badge buried under ice. Her breath was fading. The world had already moved on. But then a deep growl cut through the storm. A German shepherd stepped forward and placed his body between death and a woman he had never met. A SEAL knelt beside her, pressed 2 fingers to her throat, and whispered, "Not tonight. Not on my watch." Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. Leave a comment with the name of your city so we can see just how far this story travels. Your support means more than you know. Ethan Mercer hadn't slept more than 3 hours straight in over a year. Christmas Eve meant nothing to him. Just another night where the silence pressed too hard and the walls of his cabin closed in like the walls of a bunker he'd tried to forget. He pulled on his NWU jacket out of habit, not warmth. The digital camo pattern, green and brown, still fit like a second skin. Some things the body never unlearns. Titan sat by the door, watching him. The German shepherd's dark eyes tracked every movement, ears rotating like satellite dishes, reading Ethan the way he'd read him through 3 combat deployments. The dog's tan and black coat caught the dim light as he rose without command and pressed his nose against the door. "Yeah," Ethan muttered. "I know. Me too." He clipped the tactical leash to Titan's harness and stepped outside. The cold hit immediately, but he barely registered it. Cold was just another operating condition. He'd functioned in worse. They walked the back roads behind Main Street the way they did every night. No route, no destination, just movement. Ethan's therapist at the VA had called it hypervigilance masked as routine. Ethan called it staying alive. They were 3 blocks past the hardware district when Titan stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Every muscle locked. His ears snapped forward, his body dropped low, and a sound rolled from deep in his chest. Not a bark, not a whine. A combat alert. The same sound he'd made in Kandahar the night before an IED tore apart a convoy 60 meters ahead of them. Ethan's hand tightened on the leash. His pulse shifted from resting to operational in under 2 seconds. "What do you got, boy?" Titan pulled hard to the left, toward a narrow alley that cut between 2 brick buildings. The leash snapped tight. Ethan didn't fight it. He'd learned years ago, when Titan locked onto something, you followed, or you died. They rounded the corner and Ethan's breath stopped. A woman lay crumpled against the wall, hands zip-tied behind her back, head slumped to one side. Blood, dark, half-frozen, streaked from her temple down across her cheek. Her uniform shirt was torn open at the shoulder, navy fabric soaked through. A police badge glinted under a layer of frost. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her in a single motion, 2 fingers on her carotid. He counted. 1 beat. 2. Weak. Thready. Dangerously slow. "She's alive," he said aloud, though no one was listening. "Barely." Titan didn't wait for a command. The German shepherd lowered himself against the woman's torso and pressed his ribcage to hers. His breathing slowed deliberately, deep, steady, rhythmic. He was regulating her temperature, sharing body heat, stabilizing her the way he'd been trained to stabilize wounded operators in the field. Ethan stared at the dog. "You remember." Titan didn't look up. He pressed closer. Ethan's hands moved on instinct. He pulled his belt free and fashioned a compression wrap around the worst of the bleeding on her shoulder. He removed his own scarf and tucked it beneath her neck, protecting her airway from the cold. His fingers found the zip ties on her wrists, tight enough to cut circulation. Professional. Deliberate. This wasn't a mugging. This was a message. He reached for his phone. His fingers were steady. 3 tours in Afghanistan had burned the panic reflex out of him. He dialed 911. "This is Ethan Mercer, former Navy SEAL, service number 4729. I have an injured police officer in the alley behind Garrison and 5th. She's hypothermic, severe facial trauma, wrists bound with zip ties, pulse thready at approximately 40 beats per minute. I need an ambulance now." The dispatcher's voice crackled. "Sir, stay on the line. Units are en route." "Tell them to come fast," Ethan said. "She's running out of time." He ended the call and looked down at the woman's face. Swollen, bruised, nearly unrecognizable. But the badge on her chest read Voss. Officer Natalie Voss. Crestfield Police Department. "Officer Voss," he said firmly. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. Her eyelids didn't even flutter. "Natalie." He used her first name like a lifeline. "Stay with me. You're not dying in this alley. Not tonight." Titan shifted, pressing his nose against Natalie's cheek. A soft whimper escaped the dog's throat. The same sound he made when Ethan woke, screaming from nightmares. The sound meant, "I'm here. Don't leave." Sirens broke the silence. Headlights swept across the alley mouth. 2 patrol cars skidded to a stop. Doors flew open, boots hit the ground. The first officer in was tall, mid-40s, hand already on his holster. His nameplate read, Ellison. "Don't move," Ellison barked, flashlight locking onto Ethan's face. "Hands where I can see them." Ethan raised both hands slowly, palms open. "Navy SEAL, retired. I found her. I called it in." Ellison's eyes swept the scene. The large man in military camo. The massive dog lying on a beaten female officer. The blood on Ethan's hands. His weapon came up another inch. "Step away from her. Now." "I'm not the threat," Ethan said, his voice dead calm. "The threat left before I got here. She's got maybe 10 minutes before hypothermia finishes what they started." A second officer appeared behind Ellison. Younger, late 20s, sharp eyes already assessing the scene with more nuance than fear. Her nameplate read, Morales. "Mark," Morales said quietly. "That's Voss. That's one of ours." Ellison's face changed. The weapon lowered half an inch. Titan chose that moment to react. As Ellison stepped forward, the German Shepherd rose in a single fluid motion and planted himself squarely between the officers and Natalie. His lips pulled back. A low, thunderous growl shook the air. Controlled, deliberate. A warning that left no room for negotiation. Ellison froze. "Another 15 minutes out here, and we'd be calling a coroner, not an ambulance." The words hit hard. Morales exhaled. Ellison's jaw clenched. Torres's partner, a stocky EMT named Brooks, edged forward with a thermal blanket. Titan stiffened, but didn't snap. Instead, he leaned back just enough to let the blanket slide over Natalie's legs, then pressed close again. "He adjusted his position," Brooks muttered. "He made room for the blanket. That's not instinct. That's conditioning." Torres slid an oxygen mask toward Natalie's face. Titan watched every movement, then shifted his shoulder to allow it. His eyes never left Natalie's chest, monitoring every rise and fall. "I've worked with canine units," Torres said quietly. "I've never seen anything like this." They prepared the stretcher. Titan resisted when they tried to lift Natalie, stepping closer, blocking the movement. Torres stopped immediately. "Easy," she said. "He's going with us." Ethan leaned close to Titan's ear.
"They're helping her, boy. You did your job. Let them take her."
For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then Titan stepped back. Just 1 step. Enough. The stretcher rolled forward. Natalie was loaded into the ambulance. Titan followed to the doors, then sat in the snow, ears forward, watching the red lights through the glass. Ethan stood beside him, heart hammering, adrenaline still burning through his system. Ellison approached from behind. "You'll need to come with us," Ellison said. "Give a statement." Ethan nodded. For once, it didn't sound like a threat. As the ambulance pulled away, its sirens tearing through the silent night, Ethan turned to follow the patrol car. Then he stopped. At the far end of the street, a dark sedan sat idling. No lights, no movement. Just sitting there, engine running, watching. Titan saw it too. His body went rigid. A low growl rumbled in his chest, the same combat alert from earlier. Ethan stared at the sedan.
His SEAL training cataloged everything in 2 seconds. Make, model, tinted windows, no front plate. Someone had been watching. They saw Ethan find her. They saw the ambulance take her. They knew she was alive. The sedan's engine revved once. Then it pulled away slowly into the darkness, taillights disappearing like 2 red eyes sinking into black water. Ethan's jaw tightened. His hand rested on Titan's head, fingers curling into the thick fur. "They know," he whispered. "And now they know about us." Titan pressed against his leg, body coiled, breathing steady. Ready. The way he'd been ready on every mission they'd ever run together. Ethan looked down at the blood still drying on his hands. Officer Natalie Voss's blood. A woman he'd never met, beaten and left to die on Christmas Eve for a reason someone wanted buried. He'd spent the last year trying to disappear, trying to become invisible, Trying to forget that he was built for exactly this, for the moments when the world goes dark and someone has to step into it. That was over now. He climbed into the back of the patrol car, Titan pressing close against his leg, and watched the town of Crestfield scroll past the window. Somewhere ahead, a woman was fighting for her life. Somewhere behind, someone was already planning their next move. And Ethan Mercer, the ghost, the broken seal, the man who wanted nothing but silence, had just made himself the most dangerous variable in their entire operation. The patrol car pulled into the hospital lot, and Ethan was out before the engine cut. Titan hit the pavement beside him, leash tight, body angled toward the emergency entrance. They moved together the way they always had. No words, no signals, just rhythm built from years of reading each other's breathing. Inside, the emergency corridor swallowed Natalie Voss behind swinging double doors. Ethan tried to follow. A nurse lifted a hand against his chest. "That's as far as you go." "I found her," Ethan said. "I stabilized her in the field." "And the doctors will take it from here." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "You can wait right through there."
Titan had no interest in waiting. The German shepherd walked past the nurse, past the security desk, and planted himself directly in front of the emergency doors. He sat, spine straight, eyes locked on the place where Natalie had disappeared. When an orderly tried to guide him aside, Titan leaned his full weight back and refused to move. No growling, no teeth. Just 75 pounds of absolute refusal. The security guard, a broad man in his 50s named Keene, took one look and stopped the orderly with a hand on his shoulder. "Leave him." "Sir, we can't have a dog blocking—" "That's not a dog blocking anything," Keene said. "That's a military working dog on post. I did 20 years in the Marines. I know exactly what I'm looking at."
"He stays." Ethan exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He lowered himself into a plastic chair near the corridor and let his head fall back against the wall. His hands were still stained with Natalie Voss's blood. His heart still hadn't come down from combat tempo. 40 minutes passed. An hour. Titan didn't move. Not when nurses stepped around him. Not when a gurney rolled past close enough to brush his fur. He sat, and he watched, and he waited. A man appeared from the corridor. Rumpled suit, winter coat, clipboard. Early 30s with the strained look of someone who delivered bad news for a living. He stopped near Ethan's chair. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yeah." "I'm Dr. Wright. The officer is stable. She's still unconscious, but she's breathing on her own. You got her here in time." Ethan's shoulders dropped 2 inches. "She's going to make it?" "She's going to make it." Wright paused. "There's something else. Multiple contusions consistent with restraint and repeated blows. Fractures to 2 ribs, her left orbital socket, and her right wrist. This wasn't random violence, Mr. Mercer. Someone wanted to hurt her very specifically." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "It was a message." Wright studied him. "The police will want to speak with you. They already do." As if summoned, a figure stepped out of the elevator at the end of the hall. Plain clothes, hard eyes, shoulders that carried the permanent tension of a man who trusted evidence more than people. He walked straight to Ethan and stopped. "Detective Aaron Pike," he said. "Internal Affairs." "Internal Affairs," Ethan repeated. "Not homicide, not assault. Internal." Pike's expression didn't change. "Office of Voss was investigating missing weapons from our own property room. Firearms, tactical equipment, ammunition. Disappearing over the last 2 years." She connected the thefts to at least 3 officers and a civilian contractor working evidence transport. Ethan leaned forward. "And she got beaten half to death on Christmas Eve for it." "That's one explanation." "It's the only explanation, and you know it." Pike held his gaze for a long moment. Then he glanced at Titan, still motionless at the doors. "Your dog. He's former military?" 3 deployments, detection and patrol. Why?" Pike pulled a chair close and sat. He lowered his voice. "Officer Voss filed a preliminary report 2 weeks ago. She identified a pattern. Same access codes, same officers signing evidence in and out, same transport routes. She was building a case that would have implicated people with 15 years on the force." He paused. "She told exactly 1 person outside her chain of command. Her former K-9 unit commander at Fort Carson." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Fort Carson? That's military." "Voss wasn't always Crestfield PD," Pike said. "Before she transferred here, she was a K-9 handler at Fort Carson, military police. Her assigned dog was a German Shepherd named Shadow, detection and patrol certified. 3 years ago, during an investigation into missing weapons on base, the dog was reported lost during transport. Never recovered. The air in Ethan's lungs turned to ice. "What did you say the dog's name was?" His voice came out wrong, too flat, too controlled. "Shadow," Pike said. "Why?" Ethan didn't answer. He turned and looked at Titan. The German Shepherd sat at his post, ears forward, body still. The scar along the left side of his muzzle, the one Ethan had always assumed came from a fight with another stray, caught the fluorescent light. 3 years ago. Ethan had found him behind an abandoned diner outside of town, starving, limping, a deep laceration along his muzzle, and the look in his eyes that Ethan recognized. The look of a trained operator who'd been left behind. "Mister," Mercer? Pike was watching him carefully. You all right? When I found my dog, Ethan said slowly, he was half dead, behind a closed restaurant, about 40 miles from Fort Carson. That was 3 years ago. He was injured, dehydrated, and he had ligature marks on his hind legs. I thought someone had tied him up, and he'd broken free. Pike went very still. Are you telling me? I'm telling you I need to see Officer Voss. Right now. She's unconscious. Then I'll wait until she's not. It took 4 more hours. Ethan didn't leave the chair. Titan didn't leave the doors. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the nurse, Emily Ross, young, careful, still new enough to the night shift to carry genuine concern in her face, stepped into the waiting area. Mr. Mercer, she's awake. She's weak, but she's asking questions. Emily hesitated. She asked if there was a dog. Ethan stood. His knees ached, his back screamed, but none of it registered. He walked to Titan and unclipped the leash. Come on, boy. Titan rose instantly. Every muscle fired at once. He moved through the doors with purpose, not running, not lunging, but moving the way he moved on mission. Focused, deliberate, locked on. Natalie Voss lay propped against pillows, oxygen tube beneath her nose, one arm immobilized, her face a map of purple and black bruises. But her eyes were open, alert, searching. Titan crossed the threshold and stopped. Natalie's gaze found him. Her breath caught. Her uninjured hand gripped the blanket so hard her knuckles went white. Her lips parted, and a sound came out that wasn't quite a word, more like something breaking open after being sealed shut for years. Shadow? The name hit the room like a detonation. Titan froze, not stiffening in warning, not recoiling, freezing the way a soldier freezes when he hears a voice from a life he thought was over. His ears twitched once. His pupils sharpened. A sound escaped his throat, between a whine and a breath he'd been holding for 3 years. He stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as if the moment might shatter. His nose hovered an inch from Natalie's hand, then touched it. Natalie's fingers twitched. Tears spilled from both eyes, cutting paths through the bruises. It's you, she whispered. Oh God, it's you. They told me you were gone. They told me you ran and never came back. Titan's tail moved. Not fast, not wild. Slow and deliberate, sweeping the air behind him. He pressed his forehead against her wrist and inhaled deeply. Then he whined, a single broken sound that filled the room. Emily sucked in a breath from the doorway. He knows her. Ethan couldn't move. His hands hung at his sides. His chest felt like it was being crushed from the inside. Atlas, he whispered. I called him Titan. I didn't know. Natalie looked at Ethan then. Really looked at him. A man in military camo with blood on his hands and a haunted expression. She recognized because she saw it in the mirror every morning. You kept him alive, she said. Her voice cracked on every word. We kept each other alive, Ethan said. Natalie's jaw trembled. She fought to control her breathing. Shadow was my partner. K-9 unit, Fort Carson. We worked detection, weapons, explosives, contraband. He was the best dog I ever handled. She swallowed hard. We were investigating missing weapons from the base armory. Same pattern, same type of operation. Shadow tracked a scent to a storage facility off post. That's when everything went wrong. What happened? Ethan stepped closer. Fire, Natalie said. Small, controlled, enough chaos to cover movement.
Shadow went in after a scent. I followed. Someone hit me from behind. When I woke up in the infirmary, they told me Shadow had bolted in the smoke. They said he panicked and ran." Her voice hardened.
Shadow never panicked a single day in his life. Titan lifted his head, ears flat, a low growl vibrating in his chest, aimed at nothing in the room, aimed at something distant, and remembered.
"They took him from me," Natalie said, "because he found what they were hiding. And when I started asking questions, they transferred me out, buried the investigation, sealed the files." Ethan's blood went cold. "And now you're in Crestfield, investigating the same thing." "The same network," Natalie said. "Different location, same people running it. Weapons moving out of police evidence rooms through the same transport channels that were operating at Fort Carson. I found the connection 6 weeks ago." "And 6 weeks later, you're lying in a hospital bed on Christmas Eve." Natalie's eyes locked onto his. "They didn't expect me to survive that alley." "They didn't expect me either," Ethan said. Titan moved then.
He placed his front paws carefully on the edge of the bed and rested his weight there, his body curving toward Natalie, the same way he'd curved around her in the alley. One paw rested against her chest, his eyes half closed. Natalie's hand found his fur. Her fingers sank in and held on.
3 years, she whispered. 3 years I thought you were dead, buddy."
Titan pressed his nose against her cheek. His tail thumped once against the bed rail. Ethan watched the reunion and felt something crack open inside his chest. Something he'd been sealing shut since his discharge. Purpose. Not the military's version of it. Not orders barked through radios or coordinates punched into GPS. Something older. Something human. A woman who'd been left to die for telling the truth. A dog who'd been stolen and abandoned for doing his job. And Ethan, the broken seal who'd spent a year trying to become invisible, standing in the middle of it, with blood on his hands and the choice he'd already made. Pike appeared in the doorway. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. "Mercer, a word." Ethan stepped into the corridor. Pike waited until the door closed. "I just pulled the base transfer records from Fort Carson," Pike said. "The officer who signed the order to dispose of Shadow 3 years ago, to classify him as lost and terminate the search, was a military police sergeant named Ray Dalton." "And?" Pike's jaw tightened. "Ray Dalton left the military 18 months later. Took a job in law enforcement. He's been with the Crestfield Police Department for 2 years. Currently holds the rank of sergeant. He runs our evidence transport division." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "The man who stole her dog," he said slowly, "is the man she's been investigating." "And he's been sitting 15 feet from her desk for 2 years, Pike said. "He knew exactly what she was building. He knew exactly when to stop her." Ethan leaned against the wall, his fists clenched at his sides. Through the door, he could hear Natalie's voice, soft and broken, talking to the dog she'd thought she'd lost forever. "There's more," Pike said. "The sedan you reported at the scene. I ran the partial plate through DMV. It's registered to a civilian contractor named Hale. Martin Hale. He handles logistics for our property room. Dalton's guy. And Mercer. Hale's vehicle GPS shows he was parked 2 blocks from that alley for 47 minutes before your 911 call. He watched them beat her. He waited to make sure she didn't get up." Something shifted behind Ethan's eyes. Something cold and precise and very, very dangerous. "They made a mistake," Ethan said quietly. "What mistake?" "They left a witness.
They left a war dog. And they left a SEAL who has absolutely nothing left to lose. Pike studied him for a long moment. I need you to stay inside the lines on this, Mercer. I'll stay inside whatever lines keep that woman alive and put those men in cuffs. Ethan straightened and met Pike's eyes. But if they come at her again, or at that dog, lines won't matter. He turned and walked back into the room. Natalie was still holding Titan, her face buried against his neck, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The dog hadn't moved. He wouldn't move. Not now. Not ever again. Ethan sat down in the chair beside the bed and folded his hands. His breathing was steady. His mind was clear. For the first time in over a year, the noise in his head had gone quiet. Not because the war was over, but because a new mission had just begun. And Ethan Mercer never left a mission unfinished. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in that hospital chair with his hands folded and his eyes open, listening to the rhythm of Natalie's breathing and the soft, mechanical beep of the heart monitor. Titan lay pressed against the side of the bed, his chin resting on his paws, but his ears never stopped rotating. Every footstep in the corridor registered, every voice, every door. At 6 a.m, Pike called. Dalton clocked in for his shift 20 minutes ago, Pike said. Walked into the station like nothing happened. Coffee in hand, badge on his belt. Smiled at the desk sergeant. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. He knows she's alive. He knows. And he's acting like a man who's already figured out his next move. Pike paused. I need you at the station. Can you leave her? Ethan looked at Titan. The dog hadn't moved from Natalie's side in 9 hours. He wouldn't move for 9 more. She's got the best protection in this building right next to her. I'm on my way. He stood and crossed to the bed. Natalie's eyes were closed, but her breathing had changed. Shallow, uneven. She was awake. I heard, she said without opening her eyes. Dalton's at the station. Yeah. Her eyes opened, bruised, swollen, but sharp as a blade. He'll try to access the evidence room. He knows I documented everything. If he gets to my files before Pike does, it's over. Where are they? Locker 14, bottom shelf, inside a sealed envelope taped to the underside of a gym bag. The combination is my daughter's birthday. 0317. Ethan memorized it instantly. You have a daughter? Lily. She's 7. Natalie's voice fractured. She's with my mother. She doesn't know. Ethan put his hand on the bed rail. She's going to see her mom walk out of this hospital. That's a promise. Natalie stared at him. You don't even know me. I know you got beaten half to death for doing the right thing. That's enough. He turned to Titan. Stay with her, boy. Don't let anyone through that door. Titan lifted his head, locked eyes with Ethan, and huffed once. Understood. Ethan walked out of the hospital into the freezing Christmas morning with his jaw set and his blood running cold. The drive to the station took 8 minutes. He used every second to think. Dalton had resources, connections, and a 2-year head start. But Dalton had also made the one mistake that men like him always made. He'd assumed the woman in that alley would stay silent. And he'd never calculated for a SEAL. Pike met him at the side entrance of the Crestfield Police Department. His face was drawn tight. We've got a problem, Pike said immediately. Dalton requested access to the property room 30 minutes ago. Routine inventory check. That's his cover. I can't block it without tipping him off. Then don't block it, Ethan said. Let him go in. But I need to get to locker 14 first. Pike hesitated. If anyone sees you inside that station accessing an officer's locker, this whole case blows up in court." "Then no one sees me." Ethan held Pike's gaze.
"I did 18 months of covert operations in environments a lot harder than a police station. Give me 5 minutes." Pike exhaled hard through his nose. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a visitor's badge. "Clip this on. Follow me. Don't talk to anyone." They moved through the station's back corridor. Ethan kept his head down, his posture relaxed, his stride matching Pike's exactly. A technique he'd used 100 times to pass through hostile territory unnoticed. They reached the locker room. Pike posted himself at the entrance. 4 minutes, Pike said. "Dalton's still in the briefing room." Ethan found locker 14. The combination lock spun under his fingers. 0, 3, 1, 7. A little girl's birthday. The lock clicked open. He reached inside, past the gym bag, and his fingers found the sealed envelope taped to the bottom shelf, exactly where Natalie said it would be. He pulled it free. Inside, photographs, printouts, handwritten logs, dates, access codes, serial numbers. 2 years of missing weapons traced through transport manifests, all pointing to the same 3 names: Dalton, Hale, and the third name Ethan didn't recognize: Sergeant Victor Briggs. His phone buzzed. Pike's voice, tight and low. "Dalton's moving. He just left the briefing room. He's heading toward the lockers." Ethan sealed the envelope inside his jacket. He closed the locker, spun the combination, and was out the back door before the echo of his footsteps faded. He met Pike in the parking lot. "Got it," Ethan said. "Everything she had." "All of it?" "All of it. And Pike, there's a third name. Victor Briggs." Pike's face went white. Not pale. White. The color of a man who just watched the ground open beneath him. "Briggs," Pike repeated. "Who is he?" Pike looked at Ethan with an expression that mixed fury and dread in equal measure. "Victor Briggs is my lieutenant. He's the one who assigned me to this case." The silence between them lasted exactly 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, the entire shape of the investigation changed. The man overseeing the internal affairs investigation was part of the network. Every move Pike had made, every lead he'd followed, every piece of evidence he'd collected, Briggs had seen all of it, had probably been redirecting it from the start. "He's been watching everything you do," Ethan said. "Everything," Pike confirmed. "Every interview, every warrant request. He approved my access to the Fort Carson records last night. He knew the moment I pulled Dalton's name." "Then he knows about me. He knows about Natalie. And he knows we're closing in." Pike's phone rang. He answered, listened for 10 seconds, and his face changed again. Harder now, the shock replaced by something colder. "That was the hospital," Pike said. "Someone just called the nurses' station, asking for Natalie Voss's room number. They identified themselves as family." The nurse on duty asked for a name. The caller hung up. Ethan was already moving. "I need to get back there. Now." "Mercer, wait. They're going to try to finish what they started. You know it, and I know it." Pike grabbed his arm. "Then we do this smart. I'll put a plainclothes officer outside her door. I'll have, your plainclothes officer might report to Briggs. Your uniformed backup might be on Dalton's payroll. You don't know who's clean and who's not." Ethan pulled his arm free. "I know exactly one person in this town I trust with her life, and he's already in that room." He drove back to the hospital faster than any speed limit allowed. When he pushed through the door of Natalie's room, Titan was on his feet, body rigid, a low growl filling the space. The dog's eyes locked onto Ethan, recognized him, and the growl stopped. But Titan didn't sit back down. Something had changed. Natalie was sitting up. Her face was tight with pain, but her eyes burned with controlled fury. "Someone was outside my door," she said. 20 minutes ago. Titan heard them before the nurse did. He went to the door and just stood there growling until whoever it was left.
Ethan checked the corridor. Empty. He looked at the nurse's station. Emily Ross was on the phone, her face pale and worried. "Emily," Ethan said, "the call that came in asking for her room. What exactly did they say?" Emily put the phone down.
He said he was her brother. He wanted the room number.
"She doesn't have a brother," Ethan said. Emily's hand went to her mouth. Ethan turned back to Natalie. "We need to move you. Different room, different floor. No record in the system."
"I'm not running,"
Natalie said. "This isn't running. This is tactical repositioning. There's a difference."
"I spent 3 years running from what happened at Fort Carson. Moving, transferring, burying it. That's how they won last time."
Natalie's jaw set. "Not again." Ethan stared at her. He saw it then. The same stubborn, impossible resolve he'd seen in the best operators he'd ever served with. The ones who took the hill when every calculation said to fall back. "All right," he said. "Then we don't run. We fight. But we fight smart." He pulled out the envelope and spread the contents across her bed. Natalie's eyes went wide.
"You got them. You got my files."
"Locker 14, your daughter's birthday." He paused. Dalton was heading for them. Another 30 minutes and they'd be gone. Natalie's hands trembled as she rifled through the pages.
"This is everything. 2 years of access logs, transport manifests, signature comparisons, and this."
She pulled a single sheet free.
"This is the key. A shipping receipt from Fort Carson dated 3 days before Shadow disappeared. The receiving signature is Ray Dalton. The approving officer,
Victor Briggs," Ethan finished. Natalie looked up.
"How do you know that name?"
"He's Pike's lieutenant. He's been running the internal affairs investigation into your case. Or, more accurately, he's been making sure the investigation goes nowhere." Natalie closed her eyes. A single tear slid from beneath her bruised eyelid. Not from pain. From the sudden, crushing weight of realizing the betrayal went deeper than she'd ever imagined.
"They've been ahead of me the whole time,"
she whispered. "No," Ethan said. "They were ahead of you. Past tense. Right now, Dalton doesn't know these files exist outside that locker. Briggs doesn't know Pike is onto him. And none of them counted on a Navy SEAL and a war dog walking into the middle of their operation on Christmas Eve." Titan pushed his nose against Natalie's hand. She gripped his fur and held on.
"What do we do?"
she asked. "Pike can't go through official channels anymore. Briggs will see everything. So we go around. We take this to the county prosecutor directly. But first," Ethan's voice dropped, "we need one more piece. Something that puts Dalton physically at that alley last night. Something that ties him directly to your assault."
"My body camera," Natalie said suddenly.
"I was wearing it when they grabbed me. It was recording. They ripped it off, but those units have a 30-second buffer that uploads to the cloud even when the device is destroyed." Ethan felt his pulse kick. "You're saying there might be footage?"
30 seconds. That's all the buffer holds. But if it captured a face, a voice, anything..."
"That's enough." Ethan pulled out his phone. "Pike, I need you to access Voss's body camera cloud backup. There's a 30-second buffer from the time of the assault." Pike was quiet for 5 seconds. Then, "I'll have it within the hour. But Mercer, Briggs just requested a meeting with me. 15 minutes. He wants an update on the case." "Give him nothing. Stall." "I know how to handle a dirty cop, Mercer." "This isn't a dirty cop. This is a network. And they just found out their target survived. Their warehouse is blown. And a SEAL is sitting in her hospital room with every piece of evidence they tried to destroy." Silence on the line.
"They're going to move fast," Ethan said. "Faster than the law. That's how these operations work. When the walls start closing, they don't lawyer up. They clean house." "What are you saying?" Ethan looked at Natalie, looked at Titan, pressed against her side like a shield made of muscle and loyalty. Looked at the files spread across the bed. 2 years of one woman's courage reduced to paper and ink. "I'm saying we have maybe 12 hours before Dalton, Briggs, and Hale realize they can't contain this anymore. And when they do, they won't send someone to ask about room numbers. They'll send someone to make sure Natalie Voss never testifies." He stood and moved to the window. His reflection stared back at him. A man in military camo, with blood under his fingernails and fire behind his eyes. 12 hours, he repeated. "That's our window." Titan rose to his feet beside the bed. His ears rotated forward, his body coiled. The war dog knew the sound of an operation entering its final phase. He'd heard it before. In Kandahar, in Helmand, in places that didn't exist on any official map. Natalie reached for Ethan's hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were steel. "Then let's not waste a single minute." Briggs arrived at 11:41. Ethan clocked the headlights, cutting through the dark, watched the black SUV pull around the back of the warehouse and park next to Dalton's silver pickup. The engine died. The door opened. A man in his 50s stepped out, tall, straight-backed, moving with the stiff authority of someone who'd spent decades being obeyed without question. Lieutenant Victor Briggs didn't look nervous. He looked annoyed, like this was an inconvenience he shouldn't have had to handle personally. Dalton met him at the side door. Their voices carried in fragments across the frozen air. "All loaded? 12 crates. Everything from the property room plus the Fort Carson surplus. Van's coming at midnight. And the files? Gone. I checked her locker this morning. Empty." Ethan almost smiled. Dalton had checked the locker, found nothing, and assumed the files had never existed, or that Natalie had moved them before the attack. He had no idea they were sitting in a county prosecutor's hands right now. Briggs's voice dropped lower. "Pike?" "Handled. I gave him the debrief. He doesn't have anything. He's chasing hospital records and witness statements from the old man, the SEAL. He's not an old man. He's a combat veteran with a military working dog. That's a problem. He's a civilian with no badge and no authority. What's he going to do?" Ethan memorized every word. His phone was recording again, capturing what the wind carried. It wouldn't be admissible on its own, but combined with everything else, it painted a picture no jury would ignore. At 11:52, his phone vibrated. Pike. "County team is staged half a mile east, 12 officers full tactical. Chen signed the warrant 20 minutes ago. We go at midnight." "Briggs is here," Ethan said. "He's inside with Dalton. They're expecting a transport van any minute." "Even better. We take them all at once." "Pike, when that team hits the building, Briggs is going to try to pull rank. He's going to flash his badge, claim jurisdiction, try to shut it down." Chen already thought of that. She called the state attorney general's office. Briggs's authority has been suspended as of 30 minutes ago. He just doesn't know it yet. "Beautiful. Stay in position, Mercer. 4 minutes." Ethan counted the seconds the way he'd counted them before every breach in Afghanistan. Calm. Measured, each one bringing the moment closer. At 11:58, the transport van appeared. White, no plates. The same vehicle he'd seen earlier. It backed up to the loading dock. 2 men stepped out. Hale was one of them. Ethan recognized the build from Pike's description. Civilian contractor, mid-40s. The kind of man who moved heavy things for a living and never asked what was inside. Dalton came out to meet the van. All four men were now visible: Dalton, Briggs, Hale, and the unknown driver. Midnight. The world split open. Headlights blazed from 3 directions. Engines roared. Tires bit gravel. 12 county tactical officers moved in formation. Precise, disciplined, overwhelming. Voices shattered the silence. "Police! On the ground! Hands where we can see them! Do not move!" Hale dropped flat immediately, hands behind his head, the practiced surrender of a man who'd calculated this possibility long ago. The van driver bolted, made it 6 steps before 2 officers brought him down hard. He hit the gravel face first and stopped moving. Dalton froze. His hand twitched toward his belt, toward the weapon he'd carried for 15 years. For one terrible second, Ethan thought he'd draw. "Don't," Ethan whispered from his position. "Don't do it." Dalton's hand hovered. His jaw worked. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised both hands and laced his fingers behind his head. An officer kicked his legs apart, cuffed him, and pushed him against the truck. Briggs did not comply. He straightened to his full height, reached into his coat, and pulled his badge. "I'm Lieutenant Victor Briggs, Crestfield PD Internal Affairs. Stand down. This is my operation." The tactical team leader, a county sergeant named Reeves, built like a refrigerator with 20 years of no-nonsense etched into his face, stepped forward and didn't flinch. "Sir, I have a warrant signed by County Prosecutor Margaret Chen and authorized by the State Attorney General's office. Your departmental authority has been suspended pending investigation. Put your hands behind your back." Briggs's face changed. The authority cracked. Beneath it, for just a flash, Ethan saw something he'd seen in the eyes of every cornered man he'd ever faced. Not guilt, not fear. Calculation. Briggs was still looking for an exit. "This is a mistake," Briggs said. "Call the chief. Call—" "Hands behind your back, Lieutenant. I won't ask again." Briggs looked around the loading dock. At Dalton in cuffs. At Hale face down. At the crates of stolen weapons stacked against the wall. Serial numbers scraped clean. At the transport manifests scattered across a folding table. Every one bearing his forged signature. His shoulders dropped. His hands went back. The cuffs clicked shut, and the sound echoed off every surface like the period at the end of a sentence that had taken 3 years to write. Pike emerged from behind the tactical line. He walked straight to Briggs and stopped 2 feet away. The 2 men stared at each other. The detective and the lieutenant who'd been steering him in circles for months. "You sat across from me every morning," Pike said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of betrayal that went deeper than rank. "You read my reports. You approved my access. You told me I was doing good work. And the whole time, you were the one I was looking for." Briggs said nothing. His jaw was locked, his eyes flat. "She almost died, Victor. On Christmas Eve, in an alley. Alone." Still nothing. Pike leaned closer. "But she didn't die. And you want to know why? Because a man you never counted on walked his dog down the wrong alley at the right time. Because a German shepherd you tried to erase 3 years ago remembered exactly who he was trained to protect." Pike straightened and stepped back. "Get him out of here." Officers led Briggs to a waiting transport vehicle. As they passed Ethan's position, Briggs turned his head. Their eyes met. Ethan didn't look away, didn't blink. He let the man see exactly what was behind his eyes. Not hatred, not triumph, just the steady, unbreakable gaze of a man who'd done what needed to be done. Briggs looked away first. Chen arrived on scene 12 minutes later. Ethan watched her move through the warehouse with Pike, cataloging every crate, every document, every piece of evidence that Dalton and Briggs had spent 2 years hiding. She was thorough, methodical, and absolutely furious. 47 firearms, Chen said, reading from the initial count. Tactical equipment, ammunition, transport manifests linking this warehouse to 3 other sites across the state. She looked at Pike. This isn't a local corruption case anymore. This is a federal weapons trafficking operation. A TF? Pike asked. I'm making the call tonight, but the state charges go first. Assault on a law enforcement officer, conspiracy, evidence tampering, weapons trafficking. She paused. And attempted murder. That body camera footage is enough. Dalton's voice ordering Voss left in that alley. That's attempted murder, Detective. Pike nodded slowly. There's something else. The dog. Chen frowned. The dog? The German shepherd that was with the seal. He's a former military working dog that was deliberately separated from his handler, Officer Voss, during the Fort Carson investigation 3 years ago. Dalton signed the disposal order. Briggs approved it. The dog was dumped and left to die because he'd detected evidence that would have exposed the entire operation. Chen stared at Pike for a long moment. Then she shook her head. They tried to kill a canine officer to cover their tracks? Yes, ma'am. Add it to the charges. Animal cruelty, destruction of government property, obstruction. I want everything. Ethan stepped out from his position then. He'd been invisible for hours, exactly the way he'd wanted it. But the time for invisibility was over. He walked into the light and approached Chen. Mr. Mercer, Chen said, Detective Pike tells me you're the reason we're standing here. Officer Voss is the reason, Ethan said. She built this case alone, while the men she trusted tried to bury her. I just happened to be walking my dog. Chen studied him. Your recording of Dalton's phone conversation is going to be critical in the prosecution. Are you willing to testify? Yes. You understand what that means. Your identity becomes part of the public record. Your military history, your connection to the dog. All of it. Ethan thought of his cabin. The silence. The walls that closed in at night. The year he'd spent trying to disappear into the margins of a life that didn't fit him anymore. I've been invisible long enough, he said. It's time. Chen nodded once. Then we'll need a full statement. Tomorrow morning. My office. I'll be there. Pike drove Ethan back to the hospital. They rode in silence for the first 3 minutes. Then Pike spoke. I owe you an apology, Mercer. When I first saw you in that hospital, a man in military camo sitting next to a beaten cop with blood on his hands, I thought you were part of the problem. Most people would. Most people would be wrong, Pike glanced at him. What you did tonight, the surveillance, the recording, staying in position for hours in freezing conditions with no equipment and no backup, that's not civilian behavior. That's operational discipline. Old habits. Good habits. Pike pulled into the hospital lot. She's going to want to hear it from you. Not from a report. From you. Ethan found Natalie awake. She was sitting up, the TV off, her eyes fixed on the door like she'd been counting every minute since he left. Titan lay beside her, his head lifting the instant Ethan appeared. The dog's tail thumped once. Just once. But it said everything. It's done, Ethan said. Natalie's breath caught. Dalton? In custody. Cuffs on at midnight. Briggs? Same. He tried to pull rank. Didn't work. Hale? Face down on gravel before the first 30 seconds were over. Natalie closed her eyes. Her entire body shuddered. Not from cold, Not from pain, but from the release of something she'd been carrying so long it had become part of her skeleton. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of silence. 3 years of being told she was wrong, being transferred, being dismissed, being beaten for the crime of refusing to stop. A tear slid down her bruised cheek. Then another. Then she was crying, raw, shaking sobs that she couldn't have stopped if she'd tried. Titan pushed his face against her neck and whined softly. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and didn't say a word. He just stayed. The way Titan had stayed in that alley. The way Natalie had stayed on the case. The way some people stay, not because it's easy, but because leaving would cost them the last piece of themselves worth keeping. When the sobs finally slowed, Natalie wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at Ethan with red, swollen eyes. "My daughter," she whispered. "I want to see my daughter." Ethan pulled out his phone. "What's your mother's number?" Natalie gave it to him. He dialed. A woman answered on the second ring, voice tight with a particular terror of a mother who'd been waiting by the phone on Christmas night. "Mrs. Voss? My name is Ethan Mercer. I'm with Natalie. She's safe. She's asking for Lily." The sound that came through the phone was the kind of cry that starts in the chest and doesn't stop until it reaches the sky. Natalie heard it and pressed her hand over her mouth. Titan's ears flattened. Even the dog understood. "Bring her," Natalie said, loud enough for her mother to hear. "Please, Mom, bring her now." Ethan ended the call and set the phone down. Natalie grabbed his wrist. Her grip was stronger than it should have been, stronger than any broken woman in a hospital bed had a right to be. "You saved my life," she said. "You saved Shadow's life. And now you just gave me back the only thing that matters more than either." Ethan looked at her hand on his wrist. Then at Titan, pressed close, eyes half shut. The warrior dog finally allowing himself to rest, because for the first time in 3 years, both of his people were in the same room. "You saved yourself," Ethan said quietly. "I just showed up." Natalie shook her head. "Don't do that. Don't make yourself small. I spent 3 years watching men take credit for things they didn't do and deny responsibility for things they did. You showed up. You stayed. That's not small. That's everything." Ethan held her gaze. Something passed between them that neither of them named. Not romance, not obligation, but the bond that forms between people who've walked through fire together and come out the other side, still standing. Titan sighed deeply and rested his chin on Natalie's knee. His tail swept once across the blanket. Outside, the first light of December 26th crept through the window, pale and quiet. The longest night was finally over, and 3 lives that had been broken apart by the same corruption, a SEAL, a cop, and a war dog, had found their way back to the same room, the same fight, and the same stubborn refusal to disappear. Lily arrived at 7 in the morning. Natalie's mother carried her through the hospital corridor. A small girl with dark hair and wide, terrified eyes, clutching a stuffed rabbit so tight its ears bent sideways. The moment Lily saw her mother's face through the doorway, she stopped breathing. Then she screamed, not in fear, in relief, the kind of sound a child makes when the worst thing they ever imagined turns out not to be true. "Mommy!" Natalie opened her arms. The pain didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the weight of her daughter slamming into her chest, small fingers gripping her hospital gown, small face buried in her neck. Natalie held on with her one good arm and cried into Lily's hair. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Mommy's okay." "They said you got hurt. Grandma was crying. I thought—" I know what you thought. But I'm here. Look at me." Natalie pulled back just enough to meet her daughter's eyes.
I'm not going anywhere. Lily's gaze shifted. She noticed the bruises, the arm brace, the oxygen tube. Her bottom lip trembled violently. Who hurt you, Mommy? Natalie swallowed. Some people who didn't want me to do the right thing. Did they get in trouble? Yes, baby. They got in big trouble. Good. Lily said it with the absolute moral clarity that only a 7-year-old possesses. Then her eyes found Titan. The German shepherd sat perfectly still beside the bed, watching the child with an expression that Ethan had never seen on him before. Soft, careful, almost tender. Mommy, that's a really big dog. Natalie's voice broke on a laugh. That's Shadow, sweetheart. He's the dog I told you about. The one I lost. Lily's eyes went huge. The one from the army? You found him? He found me. Lily looked at Titan. Titan looked at Lily. Then the dog lowered himself flat on the floor, chin on his paws, tail sweeping gently, making himself small for her. Lily slid off the bed, crouched beside him, and placed one tiny hand on his head. Hi, Shadow, she whispered. Thank you for saving my mommy. Titan's tail thumped 3 times. He pressed his nose against Lily's palm and exhaled. Warm, steady. The breath of a warrior who'd finally found everyone he'd been searching for. Ethan stood near the door. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He watched the 3 of them, mother, daughter, dog, and felt something inside him shift so fundamentally he almost didn't recognize himself. For 18 months, he'd been convinced that his life after the military was just an afterword, a slow fade-out. But standing in that room, watching a little girl thank his dog for saving her mother's life, Ethan Mercer understood for the first time that some missions don't end when you take off the uniform. Some missions are just beginning. Natalie's mother, Margaret, early 60s, hands still shaking from 2 days of terror, approached Ethan in the hallway. You're the one who found her, Margaret said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am. Margaret studied him the way only a mother can, reading every line on his face, every shadow behind his eyes. Then she took his hand in both of hers and held it. I've been praying since Christmas Eve, she said, praying for a miracle, and God sent a soldier and a dog. Her voice cracked. Thank you. From the bottom of everything I am. Thank you. Ethan didn't trust his own voice. He nodded once. Margaret squeezed his hand, then turned and walked back to her daughter's room. The days that followed moved with the relentless momentum of justice finally unleashed. County Prosecutor Chen built the case with surgical precision. Dalton, Briggs, and Hale were formally charged on December 28th. Assault on a law enforcement officer, conspiracy to commit murder, weapons trafficking, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice. The charges stacked 12 pages deep. Ethan gave his statement the morning after the raid. He sat across from Chen in her office, hands folded, voice steady, and told her everything. The alley, the hospital, the locker, the warehouse, the recording. He didn't embellish. He didn't soften. When the fear came, he acknowledged it and kept talking. Chen played the recording of Dalton's phone call for the grand jury on January 3rd. When the jury heard the words, "She stays in the alley," a woman in the front row put her hand over her mouth. A man in the back closed his eyes. The indictment came back in under 40 minutes. Unanimous. Natalie testified on January 7th. She walked into the hearing room on her own. No wheelchair, no cane, just willpower and a bruised jaw she refused to hide. She wore her dress uniform. Her badge was polished. She sat down, looked the board directly in the eyes, and spoke for 2 hours without stopping. She named dates. She named access codes. She named the night Shadow was taken from her, and the night she was beaten for the crime of remembering.
When the defense attorney asked why she hadn't reported her concerns through the proper chain of command, Natalie's voice went quiet and sharp. "I did," she said. "I reported to Lieutenant Briggs. He told me the case lacked evidence. He told me to drop it. And then he told the men I was investigating exactly what I knew and when I planned to act." The room went silent. The defense attorney didn't ask another question. By mid-January, the case had grown beyond Crestfield. ATF agents traced the weapons pipeline to 3 additional sites across Colorado and into New Mexico. 14 people were indicted. The Fort Carson investigation was reopened. 2 military officials who had signed off on Shadow's disposal were placed under federal investigation. Natalie was reinstated with full honors on January 15th. Her suspension was voided. Her record cleared. A formal apology was entered into the department minutes by the new chief, Laura Bennett, early 50s, appointed after the suspensions, a woman who spoke plainly and believed that the only way to rebuild trust was to start by telling the truth. Bennett called Natalie into her office the day after reinstatement. "I'm not going to pretend an apology fixes this," Bennett said, "but I'm asking you to stay. The department needs officers who do what you did." "What I did almost got me killed," Natalie said. "Yes," Bennett replied. "And what you did saved this department from itself. That's not a contradiction. That's leadership." Natalie stayed. She was promoted to detective and assigned to lead the department's new anti-corruption task force, a unit she'd effectively built from a hospital bed, with zip-tie marks still healing on her wrists. The hearing that mattered most happened on January 20th. Natalie stood before the board and made a request that had nothing to do with her career. "I want Shadow's service record restored," she said. "He was a certified military working dog who served his country and his handler with distinction. He was stolen, abandoned, and left to die because he did his job too well. He deserves to be recognized." The motion passed unanimously. Chief Bennett personally clipped the honorary K-9 service emblem to Titan's collar in a ceremony at the station. The inscription read, "K-9 Shadow, Honorary Service." Titan tilted his head, sniffed the emblem, and accepted the attention with a single soft huff that drew laughter from every officer in the room. "He won't be returning to active duty," Bennett said, "but his service stands. And this department will never forget what he endured, or what he gave." Applause filled the station. Real applause. Not polite, not obligatory. The kind that starts in the chest and builds until the walls vibrate. Natalie knelt beside Titan and pressed her forehead against his. "You came back, buddy," she whispered. "You came back." Ethan stood near the wall, arms folded, watching. Pike appeared beside him. "What happens to you now?" Pike asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean the cabin, the isolation, the walking your dog at midnight because you can't sleep thing. What happens to that?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "I've spent a year trying to be invisible," he said. "Turns out invisible isn't the same as safe. It's just lonely." Pike nodded. "Department's starting a veteran outreach program, community liaison, tactical training for officers, therapy dog program using retired military canines." He paused. "They need someone who understands both sides, the uniform and the aftermath." "You offering me a job?" "I'm telling you the door's open. What you do with it is your call." By spring, Ethan had walked through that door. He worked with the department's veteran outreach 3 days a week, accompanying Titan on visits to the station and the local VA center. Dr. Nisha Patel, a behavioral specialist contracted by the department, evaluated Titan during a series of structured sessions and delivered her assessment to Bennett
with a single word. "Grounding," Patel said. "He doesn't react. He anchors. He creates calm. That's the rarest thing a therapy dog can do." Titan became an official therapy dog, not for patrol, not for pursuit, for presence. He sat at the feet of officers who carried too much silence home with them. He lay beside veterans in the VA waiting room who couldn't find words for what they'd survived. He did what he'd always done. He stayed. And his staying made space for others to stay too. Ethan started teaching self-defense and tactical awareness at the community center on Tuesday nights. He didn't talk about his deployments. He didn't tell war stories. But people saw the way he moved, the way Titan followed his breathing, and they understood that the man standing in front of them had walked through something most people only read about, and had come out the other side still willing to help. Natalie returned to active duty with a clarity that surprised even herself. The guilt she'd carried for 3 years, the guilt of losing Shadow, of failing to protect her partner, dissolved the morning she watched Titan walk through the station doors with his emblem catching the light. He hadn't been lost. He'd been waiting. And so had she. Lily visited the station every day after school. Titan greeted her at the door each time, tail sweeping, ears soft, the 75-pound warrior dropping to the floor so a 7-year-old could wrap her arms around his neck. The officers watched it happen and said nothing. Some things don't need commentary. They just need witnesses. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the night that started everything, the 3 of them walked into the church at the center of Crestfield. Pastor Ellen Wright paused mid-sentence and smiled. "Friends," she said gently, "we have guests." Ethan sat in a pew for the first time since he'd left the military. Natalie sat beside him. Lily sat between them. Titan lay at their feet, his emblem glinting in the candlelight. The hymns washed over them, and for once, the words about peace and goodwill didn't feel distant. They felt earned. When the time came for acknowledgments, Natalie stood. The room quieted. "1 year ago tonight," she said, "I was left to die in an alley. I survived because a man I'd never met refused to look away. And because a dog I thought I'd lost forever remembered who he was trained to protect." She turned to Ethan. He didn't stand. He didn't speak. He just met her eyes and nodded once. Chief Bennett rose from the front pew. "Sometimes courage doesn't wear a badge," she said. "Sometimes it wears dog tags and fur. And sometimes it wears a Navy uniform and shows up on the worst night of your life, because that's what warriors do." The church erupted, not in polished applause, but in something rougher and more honest. The sound of a town that had watched its own institutions betray one of its own, and had seen 3 strangers refuse to let that betrayal win. That night, Natalie knocked on Ethan's cabin door. Lily was already asleep against her grandmother's shoulder in the car. Natalie held a paper bag from the bakery on Elm Street. "Thought we'd stop by," she said. "Hope that's okay." Ethan stepped aside. "You're always welcome." They sat by the fire. Titan stretched out between them, chin on his paws, eyes half closed. They talked about ordinary things. The outreach program, Lily's school play, Pike's promotion to senior detective. Nothing needed to be said about the alley, or the warehouse, or the men now serving federal sentences. Those truths lived quietly, no longer demanding attention. As midnight approached, church bells rang in the distance. Ethan leaned back and listened. Natalie watched him. "You still have nightmares?" she asked. "Sometimes. Fewer now." "What changed?" He looked at Titan, then at Natalie. "I stopped trying to be invisible. Turns out the things I was running from, the noise, the people, the mission, were the same things that kept me alive. Natalie smiled. It was the first full, unguarded smile he'd ever seen on her face. It changed everything about the room. Merry Christmas, Ethan. Merry Christmas, Natalie. Titan sighed deeply. His tail swept once across the floor. Outside, the town rested. Inside, the fire hummed.
3 lives, once shattered, once hunted, once abandoned, had found their way to the same room, the same warmth, and the same unshakable truth that some people carry in their bones. Sometimes we wait for miracles to arrive with thunder and light from the sky. But God often works in quieter ways, through a soldier who refused to stay hidden, through a loyal dog who never forgot his duty, through a woman who chose truth over safety, and through a frozen night that became a doorway to something none of them expected, a second chance at belonging. In our daily lives, we pass people who feel invisible. We hear cries that are easy to ignore. But when we choose courage over comfort, when we stay instead of walk away, we become part of something greater than ourselves. Even the smallest act of bravery can change the course of a life. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and type Amen if you believe that God still works through ordinary people and unexpected miracles. Subscribe to this channel to continue spreading faith, kindness, and light into a world that needs it now more than ever. May God bless you and protect you wherever you are watching from.